Trump has said many genocidal statements.
On the one hand, you want to say these sanctions are genocidal, but on the other hand, you want to say they're not hitting us and they're not going to weaken us. Which is it?
The situation right now for the global economy, as you know, is terrible. He is bringing catastrophe upon his own people, but also upon the entire planet.
The Strait of Hormuz, the longer it goes on, everybody finds ways around it.
No, there's no way around Iran. If Iran wants to destroy the Saudi oil installations, it could do it tonight. Then there would be no more oil. For Iran, this is a fight for survival.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy. The shooting war between America and Iran may be on hold, but the economic war is moving to full scale. Iran has mocked American claims of this being D-Day that will cut Iran off and force it to give in. And Iran's trading partners are not impressed either with American threats. Pakistan is the latest to reject secondary sanctions as illegal, and China has already said it won't be taking orders from America. But Iranian leaders have also acknowledged the hardships of economic war on the people. Food inflation is desperately high, and petrol is also running low. And America claims it is getting millions of barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz every day, despite Iran's claim to have closed it. So where's this all moving? I'm joined by Professor Mohammed Marandi from Tehran University, a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiating team. Hi there, thanks for joining us. Now, Mr. Ghalibaf, the Speaker, and others have said Iran will win an economic war. How do you win an economic war when oil is getting through the Strait of Hormuz, the global oil price is back down a little from its highs, and the squeeze on the international picture doesn't quite seem as difficult as the squeeze at home in Iran?
Much of the oil that's getting through is getting through with Iran's consent. And Iran has been saying that all along. Iran has not closed it in completely where nothing gets through. But if we look at the number of ships, large ships that go through the Strait a day now, and compare them to before the war, there's no comparison, especially when it comes to fertilizers, when it comes to helium and other petrochemical goods, as well as refined products. And the reason is that the United States has imposed a siege on Iran. And second, because the countries in the region, they assisted the United States and the Israeli regime in carrying out war against Iran. So we resisted their aggression, second war in a year. And ultimately, Trump had to accept the MOU. And from day one, even though he signed it personally, he did not abide by his commitments. And so the Iranians are saying, as long as you don't abide by your commitments, we're not going to abide by our commitments.
Yes, I mean, but the question is, what does victory mean when it comes to an economic war? You know, people in Iran are struggling, food prices are high, that's been acknowledged by political leaders who want an end to the war. I mean, does victory really just mean surviving? You know, that you can't be defeated?
It's that too, but it's also punishing the enemy, making sure the United States and its allies are punished so badly that they never again think about slaughtering children, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, bombing petrochemical plants, bombing gas installations, and even a pharmaceutical plant was bombed. So we have to make sure that Trump doesn't walk away and then after rearming himself 6 months later, he wages another wave of attacks. No one in the West is going to condemn him. We've seen for 3 years there's a genocide going on in Gaza. No one in the West has sanctioned the Israeli regime. They then went on to Lebanon. No one in the West condemned or sanctioned the Israeli regime. So why should we have any faith that Western countries are going to stop the United States from carrying out further aggression? We have to make sure that the price that Trump pays and Netanyahu is high enough so that we feel relatively secure. and he has to carry out his commitments in accordance with the MOU.
That's what I mean, though. I mean, because making Trump pay is not proving that easy either, is it? I mean, yes, there are political problems. The war is unpopular at home. America is suffering inflation. He'll probably do badly in the midterms because of the war in Iran. But it's not enough for you to be able to say, we've really punished him, we've brought him to his knees. So we're almost in a sort of a, not quite a stalemate, but it's looking a bit like that, isn't it? That this drags on for a long, long time, with both sides suffering, but perhaps the Iranian people suffering a little bit more.
I don't know if the Iranian people are going to ultimately suffer more. We'll have to wait and see. But the point is that for Iran, this is a fight for survival. The United States, the Israeli regime, want to destroy our country. And Trump has said many genocidal statements over the past few months. And again, in the West, no one condemns him. We don't see European parliamentarians or British parliamentarians or Canadians condemning him for saying he's going to send Iran back to the Stone Age or obliterate Iran or to wipe out his civilization.
You do, to be fair, but perhaps not at the level that you want to see.
Yes, maybe a couple of people here or there. That doesn't really matter. But it shows that not everyone is obedient to the ruling class, but the political class in general, that's where it stands. So we have no option but to make sure that this does not happen again. And the MOU is the only way forward. He signed the MOU, but he refused to carry it out. He refused to implement Article 1. He refused to implement anything except for initially when he he ended the siege, and that was only because he needed the oil to get out. But in any case, the situation right now for the global economy, as you know, is terrible. And so he is bringing a catastrophe upon his own people, but also upon the entire planet.
But give us a sense of how Iran looks ahead. I mean, what is being said now is that it appears that the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran sort of found was actually its big weapon, and much more threatening, really, to the world than any kind of nuclear program. It had a grip on the world economy for many months, but it appears now to be a diminishing asset because these routes have been found, ships turning off their transponders, 10 million barrels of oil getting a day, through a day. The Americans now saying 12 million barrels, which is obviously down on the norm, but it's still a significant amount of oil getting through. And so, it is not the stranglehold on the world economy that Iran would like it to be.
No, it's not. The United States is not secretly getting 10 million barrels of oil or 8 million barrels of oil or 6 million barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz a day secretly. That's just nonsense. Part of the reason why there's more oil going through is because Iran allows Iraqi oil to go through because Iraq did not participate in this war. And Iran is not going to knowingly punish the Iraqi people for what the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Kuwaitis and the Bahrainis did. They assisted the United States. They assisted the Israeli regime. They were part of this war, and they continue to be a part of the war. As we speak, their U.S. planes are based in these countries. U.S. forces are based there. The United States has enormous assets across these, not necessarily in the bases, but in other buildings, in hotels, and across the Persian Gulf region.
But as time goes on, the Saudis look at other means of getting their oil out. They're talking about building pipelines. They're talking about getting more out through the Red Sea. And there have been some ships getting through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, despite the threats of the Houthis. I mean, what I mean is, the longer it goes on, everybody finds ways around it.
No, there's no way around Iran. If Iran wants to destroy the Saudi oil installations, it could do it tonight. Then there would be no more oil. Those pipelines mean nothing. We saw that when the Israeli regime bombed Iran's South Pars gas field, Iran said beforehand, if they strike our critical infrastructure, we will hammer the critical infrastructure of this coalition. And one of the places that Iran hit was Qatar. and its oil gas installations. Go and ask them how things are over there. All Iran has to do is spend 1 or 2 days firing missiles at the key components of the oil and gas facilities that exist in these countries, and they won't have oil or gas for months or years at all. So Iran is not trying to destroy the energy market. Iran is trying to put pressure on Trump to abide by his commitments. And if he does not abide by his commitments, then the situation will continue. But if they think that they're just going to be able to normalize the global economy and that there will be no consequences, and all they have to do is just pretend that the amount of ships that are passing through and tankers that are passing through are much greater than they actually are, yes, they can manipulate the market for a while. But when those reserves come to an end, then they'll have to find a different argument.
I mean, we've talked in the past about how difficult it is to predict what Trump's going to do next, but he's facing elections in November, and he clearly doesn't want to be in a shooting war in the period running up to that because it's very unpopular in America. So do you think you can foresee for the next few months at least that the war is economic rather than physical?
No, it could be both. And the reason is that the United States will not succeed in economic warfare. And by the way, that's another issue that no one in the West cares about at all. This is a war crime. These are crimes against humanity, trying to starve the Iranian population. Of course, that's something that the Europeans and the British and the Americans have been trying to do for many years through the maximum pressure sanctions, because maximum pressure sanctions are directed at women and children, are directed at citizens. We all know that. Everyone knows that. But it's in the West, they pretend, including in the media, they pretend that this is a means to hurt governments. But the objective is to make people starve, bring people to their knees. So out of desperation, they rise up against their governments.
Yeah, but people aren't starving, are they, at the moment? I mean,
that's not the point. That's not the point. The objective, but people die. Many people die.
Well, what is the effect of the sanctions right now? I mean, as you say, I mean, Iran has faced maximum sanctions before, and Trump did this before in his first term, and it didn't work. But it does have an effect on the population. It makes things like medicines much more expensive and difficult to get hold of. So right now, what is the effect of sanctions on the Iranian people? Because on the one hand, you want to say these sanctions are genocidal, but on the other hand, you want to say, but then they're not hitting us and they're not going to weaken us. So kind of which is it?
Well, they're not going to weaken the country's resolve, because at the end of the day, the country knows that if it says, okay, let's have peace, the United States is not going to have is not going to move towards some sort of peaceful resolution which is just and fair. It is going to behave more aggressively, more abusively. The United States is not a normal country. The collective West is not normal. They are abnormal. They always, whenever you show goodwill, they will go for the kill. They show it as a sign of weakness. We've done this so many times with the United States and with Europe. In the 1990s, the Iranians gave Conoco, the oil company, an oil field in the Persian Gulf. They negotiated for 2 years, and then as it was about to be signed, the United States imposed sanctions. And I can go on until the JCPOA.
But what is the effect on people right now? I mean, as you know, I was there, a couple of months ago, and things were still in the shops, but people were buying less because food inflation was high and money is short for most people. What is the effect now in terms of sort of, how much food people can buy? Are they living day to day, week to week? Where does the weekly pay packet, stretch to?
Yeah, you can imagine that's exactly how it is. How much meat can you purchase this month? How much, how if your children need shoes, if you need clothes, when you pay the bills, do you have the money? If your factory is shut down because pharmaceutical factories get a lot of their supplies from the ports, and then they can't produce the medicine, because the United States has blocked the ports, or the gasoline, which people, because Iranian gasoline is very cheap, it's a couple of cents, a U.S. cents a liter. So historically the consumption is very high, has been very high, but as a result, Iran imports gasoline, and it's heavily subsidized, of course. But now that you can't import it, you have to adjust the prices, and that's going to even put more pressure on the people. But the point is that the objective has been this from the beginning. Why did the United States bomb the school? Why did it bomb the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran? Why did it bomb apartment blocks in my neighborhood? Why did it bomb the children's hospital in Ahvaz, the cancer hospital? And why did it do all these things? Because it wanted to terrorize the population, but it also wanted to destroy the infrastructure to set the country back. So that was targeting ordinary people. So in your piece, and you saw I was not pleased at all with the introduction.
The item we showed the other day, yeah.
Exactly. Your colleague was speaking about Trump's starvation siege, the sanctions, and he said Iranians are now finding their voice. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, because what is clear is that, some people are losing patience. They're annoyed. Now, they're not calling for the overthrow of the government again in the same way as they did earlier in the year. And
let's say all people are like that. Let's say I want to go to the streets right now, and I want to overthrow the government now because of the financial situation. Fine, I found my voice. Based on what? Based on a starvation siege. In other words,
no, but that may be the point. It may be the object of the sanctions to say, if we can put the economic pressure on and keep it on, then people will become more annoyed. We've seen that through history, that there are waves in which people initially support their government because they feel they're under attack, but there may come a point at which they say, enough. We need an end to this war. Our leaders aren't delivering it. We need some change. We need to protest. And they start to protest. And that's what we're starting to see a little bit of on a very small scale, which is what we showed in that piece the other day, that people were actually standing up and criticizing administrators. I give you...
Your logic is deeply problematic. In other words, the Nazis, you are basically saying, well, the Nazis in Europe, let's say they starved the population in the cities. They besieged the minorities, and they prevented them from getting food, and they forced them to go to the concentration camps, and everything worked fine after that. That's the logic.
I'm not taking a value judgment on whether it's a right or wrong thing to do. What I'm saying is that may be part of the strategy, and it may be happening. What will the Iranian government do to try and keep people on side? Now, for example, we're seeing queues at the petrol pumps because Iran is unable now to bring in as much refined petrol because of the blockade as it needs. Now, petrol is very cheap in Iran, or almost free, but it is rationed. Now, if you can't give people enough to keep their cars going as they want to, they're going to be annoyed. So how will the government deal with these kinds of pressures as time goes on?
Well, and so that your audience knows, it's rationed in that it's like a cent.
It's basically free.
A cent a liter, and then there's a second layer of cost. Let's say if you purchase more diesel, then or gasoline, you pay like 3 cents a liter, and then if you buy the expensive type, it's 5 cents a liter. Right now, it's not rationed. You can buy as much as you want. Let's say for 6-7 cents a liter. I don't know the price, American cents. But yes, we may come to a point where they raise the prices and the subsidies decrease. Yes, and it's going to cause difficulty for people. And of course, it's going to make life more difficult, just as the war was difficult. When I was sitting here doing my interviews, we were being bombed. And you had to either accept that you had to resist, or you had to raise your hands. The Iranian people are not going to raise their hands. They're not going to submit. You saw the funeral in Tehran, or at least the images of it. many millions of people, and then in Mashhad, and then in Qom, and then in Iraq as well. Tens of millions of people participated. For once, Western media couldn't hide that reality. Why did so many people come to the streets? I read, I think it was the New York Times, said that many people came out of curiosity. Yeah, that's how the West likes to frame it. But the reality is that the support that the Islamic Republic of Iran has for it from its population, and the depth of that support is something that you don't have in the UK. But somehow Iran is the regime and everyone else is the government. The Saudi government. No, not even the Israelis who call them a regime. It's always the Iranians who are the regime. But it's strange because it is this horrible Iranian regime that is opposed to the ongoing genocide, and the collective West is supporting the genocide, but we're the regime.
No, I mean, I know regime is a word that's, the authorities in Iran particularly hate because they feel it's sort of sneering and looks down on them. But
actually, they don't care because they don't follow the Western news.
No, they do. They do. I've been to the minister's office, and the Western channels are on the wall on his TVs, and they do watch. I mean,
well, maybe those who have to do with media, but it's not something that anyone here is obsessed with. I'm the person who constantly says in my media interviews, Western regimes, because that's how they describe Iran. But the point I'm making is that this reflects on how the West creates the narrative. That's how they dehumanize. That's using these words, the way they frame. People are beginning to find their voice. That's how you frame support for genocide. That's how you frame support for a policy policies that are war crimes.
So how would you break it down? I mean, in terms of sort of popular support. In Iran. In all countries, there's a group of people who strongly support the government, there's a group of people who strongly oppose it, and there's a group in the middle who can sort of be pushed one way or another depending on circumstances. How would you break down Iranian society right now?
I would say that it has far more popular support than anything you have right now in Europe or the UK, by far. By far.
Would you put numbers on it?
There are polls. I think the University of Maryland does polls a lot. People can go and look. I don't know their latest numbers, but it has a high degree of legitimacy. And I think the funerals, the fact that they murdered the leader and they slaughtered the kids, which were intentional on day one, which was intentional.
Well, we don't know that. I mean, I know you believe that.
No. Look, I've been in war operations.
But you have to prove these things, and that hasn't been proven.
And they committed the crime, not us. On day one of any major military operation, the first targets are very carefully vetted for weeks, if not months. That school was a known school. It was there for years. The problem was that those kids so many of them were the children of officers, and they wanted to teach them a lesson. And it was not just them. On day one, there was another interesting event, not just the hospital in Tehran, the Gandhi hospital. I think that too was on day one, a major hospital that I don't know if you visited or not. The irony of it is that it's called Gandhi. But also they bombed a sports complex on day one in La Merde, and a bunch of teenage girls were playing volleyball.
Yeah, that was another one that it didn't get quite as much coverage. These things are constantly reminded, in Iran, to keep people, to remind people of what the war is about from the government's perspective. I know, but I want to kind of come forward.
From the perspective
from the people's perspective, fine.
Sane, normal human being.
Yeah, I mean, but in terms of sort of,
I mean, you see the way you put it is that the United States commits the crime, but the Iranian government is using it to justify. No, this is a crime committed against Iranians.
I didn't say using it, but
the starvation. Yeah, well, that's how it sounds. Whether it's the starvation siege, or whether it's the airstrikes, it's like when they flatten an apartment block in Gaza, and then they say there was someone from Hamas in there, and everyone says, they like 100, they killed 100 people. And they did that in Iran too many times. Sometimes they're just bombing apartment blocks for nothing. But there's always some sort of justification. for any crime committed against the Iranian people. But if someone listens to the media, the Western media, when it comes to Iran, you think that we're bombing London day and night. You think that people in Iran are slaughtering
Well, I
kids
did want to ask you about something that happened in the last week, in which Britain said that a relatively small power plant in this country was attacked by in a cyber attack, and the claim was that this was linked to Iran. Does that make sense to you?
How can you prove or disprove what the British regime says? As we were waging war, as we were defending our country, they declared the Revolutionary Guards a terrorist organization. Is the IDF a terrorist organization? Is the U.S. Army a terrorist organization?
So do you think it's likely that that did happen and that it was Iranian?
No, I'm saying that anything that your government or your regime does, to me, cannot be proven to be because they are not rational actors. They're not objective.
People in this country are also skeptical about these kinds of claims, which is why I'm asking you whether you think it's likely, but you don't know.
I mean, share
clearly.
Their skepticism.
Look, okay,
and that is why I call the British government a regime, because they do not reflect the will of the people.
Well, let's talk briefly before we finish about what Iran is doing with its partners and its trading partners, because it's been quite interesting this week. You know, we've got the Qataris in Tehran right now. China very clearly saying it won't be pushed around by the Americans. Pakistan saying it doesn't believe the secondary sanctions apply to them. There's clearly a lot of trade going on still through Iraq. What is the strategy? You know, is it to just keep building whatever alliances you have in order to fend off the economic pressure? You know, what are they trying to do? I mean, because I think what we're used to seeing is, you know, Iran actually trying to get one step ahead. So if it's trying to get one step ahead now, where's it going?
Well, ultimately, the Iranians, as we speak, have an obligation to keep the economy functioning, to rebuild the destroyed homes. As we speak, they're building the apartment blocks. In our neighborhood, there's an apartment block that they destroyed for no apparent reason, just killing people. That has been brought down, and they're beginning to rebuild that building. Maybe it was because there was a bank on the first floor. I don't know why they did that anyway. But they have to rebuild because society has to move on. So right now, the government has shifted towards a, let's say, resistance economy, where they're rebuilding the damaged infrastructure, but also they're trying to continue trade. But it's more difficult than before because we're not able to use our ports like before. I mean, some things are happening. The things do get through the Strait of Hormuz on the Iranian side. But the Iranians are now expanding their trade corridors through Turkmenistan to Central Asia to China, through Afghanistan. A lot is going on between Iran and Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Caspian Sea. We have 15 neighboring countries. So, and countries across the world are across the global south or in Asia or the global majority are sympathetic to Iran because they know this is a war of aggression. It's only in the West where they impose maximum pressure sanctions on Iran. It's only in the West whenever the United States or the Israeli regime attacks us, they support it and say that the Israelis do and the Americans do our dirty work for us. But across the region, countries know that the Iran is the victim and has been the victim. And the reason why Iran is attacked is because Iran is opposed to genocide. I mean, it's quite simple. Iran says no to ethno-supremacism, no to genocide, and that in the West is completely unacceptable. And as they continue to wipe out the people, every day they're killing kids in Gaza. Every single day. Every single day. And yet it's not even being reported in the news. In Lebanon, they're killing teenagers.
Well, it is.
They're flattening apart. They're not reflecting it in Western media. It's like every now and then a thing or two. This is the great crime of our era. But of course, it's just like Iran. In Iran, they try to strangle us, and then they say, well, the Iranians, they're finding their voices.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Mohammed Marandi, for joining us. That's the forecast for today. Bye-bye.